Today I'm going to be telling you 3 stories that at first glance seem like total BS. However, they're not. All 3 of these stories are 100% real. So real, in fact, that you probably couldn't even make this stuff up if you tried. From a man who disappeared in a ski resort in northern New York, only to reappear in Sacramento with no memory of how he got there a few days later, to a deadly booby trap left on a hiking trail in Utah. I'm telling you, these stories, they're fascinating and a little bit, pardon my language here, they're a little bit f***ed up, to be honest. So to start off here, let's head to an area that I know very, very well. That would be the Adirondacks of New York State. I absolutely love this place so much, and for that reason, I'm excited to take you all on a virtual trip there right now. And by the way, this trip costs no money. The only thing that you have to do is hit that subscribe button to cover your admission, especially if you're a repeat viewer. In February of 2018, a group of Toronto-based coworkers took a ski trip to Whiteface Mountain in the Adirondacks. What was supposed to be, you know, a fun, normal vacation for these folks, well, it quickly turned into a mystery that was so bizarre that it would end up making national headlines very quickly. So at the time of this story, I was actually finishing up my senior year of college, only about an hour and a half away from Whiteface Mountain. I was at Clarkson University in Potsdam, New York, and because I was so close to where this happened, and because I've hiked Whiteface and skied it before, well, this story caught my attention right from the beginning, and I remember it unfolding quite well, and so I'm excited to tell this one. 50-year-old firefighter Danny Philippidis was in the group that went to Whiteface Mountain. On February 7th, Philippidis left his friends to take like a quick run back to his car so he could retrieve his phone, is my understanding. Now, obviously, I wasn't on the trip. I don't know these people, but from what I've gathered, I'll say, is that this group of skiers were just like, you know, they were just normal skiers. You know, they were staying inbounds in the resort. It's not like they were ducking ropes and then going, you know, deep into the backcountry. And by the way, the reason that I wanted to specify that is because, well, after Danny parted ways with his friends, he literally vanished into thin air. I feel like a lot of the stories that I read and hear about when it comes to missing skiers, well, a lot of the time I feel like they leave the boundaries of the resort, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and then they get lost as a result. But that is not what Danny was doing. He just disappeared. Super strange. And when he failed to meet his friends at the ski lodge later that day around 4 p.m., his friends and his coworkers unfortunately knew that something had gone horribly wrong. So the obvious question is, what the hell happened? And we're gonna get into that. It's a very strange story. So strange, in fact, that I actually want to take a brief pause here before we get there, and I want to tell you about something that is not strange, which is Drink Element. Drink Element is the sponsor of this video. They are the best electrolyte drink mix company in the game. It's not even close. And so if you are someone who sweats a lot, or if you're doing any physical activity, you know, certainly hiking or yard work, going to the gym, whatever it is, when you're sweating, it's really not enough just to drink a lot of water. Of course you want to do that, but what you really want to do is replace your electrolytes. If you don't do that, you're gonna get fatigued, you're gonna cramp up. I've experienced this so many times on various backpacking trips and hiking trips that I've done. So this is where Drink Element comes in. First of all, I just feel like so many of the other companies, they just have a bunch of sugar and a bunch of nonsense in them, and Drink Element doesn't have that, and it still tastes way better. All it has is the electrolytes that you need. It's got sodium and potassium, magnesium, all the good stuff, everything you need to feel healthy and hydrated. And they also just have, going back to the taste, they have the best flavors. Citrus salt is probably my favorite. Grapefruit salt is really good. Orange salt is awesome. And then if you're feeling a little funky, they got some very creative flavors that you're not gonna find anywhere else. I'm talking things like mango chili, chocolate salt, even an unflavored version if you're feeling, you know, just if you're feeling unflavored, whatever that means. They have these unique flavors, and the more standard flavors all taste amazing. And so what you really wanna do, because they have so many flavors, you really wanna try them all. And the way that you can do that is by going to drinkelement.com/KyleHatesHiking. That's drinklmnt.com/KyleHatesHiking. Go to that link. It's also, linked right at the top of the description. Go make a purchase of whatever flavor sounds the best to you, or you could try their Element Sparkling, by the way. It's like the same thing, all the electrolytes, but in like a sparkling water can. It's delicious. Go purchase whatever sounds best to you, and when you do it through my link, you're gonna get a sample pack of 8 of their flavors thrown in with your order for no extra cost. So you can try them all, and then the next time you'll really know, exactly what hits the spot for you. drinklmnt.com/KyleHatesHiking. Thank you so much to Element. I absolutely love them. They've been a huge supporter of the channel, and I appreciate all of you that check them out as well. With that said, let's get back to the story. So Danny just vanishes off the mountain, basically, and his friends report him missing, and then after this, they searched hard for this dude. Searchers absolutely just swarmed the area around Whiteface Mountain, with desperation growing and growing with each passing day, by the way. I'm telling you, over 135 people were involved with the search. They used helicopters, and of course they used search dogs as well. They searched and they searched, but this yielded precisely no results. They just couldn't find him. He wasn't trapped in the woods somewhere. He definitely wasn't hiding out in a hotel in the nearby town of Lake Placid. He wasn't found with an injury off of a ski trail, and he wasn't even found back in his hometown of Toronto. However, he was eventually found, or more accurately, I should say, he reappeared. Danny finally reappeared, still dressed in all of his ski gear, by the way, in Sacramento, California. So that's pretty strange, and just to make it even stranger, Danny had no recollection of how the hell he got from Whiteface Mountain in New York State all the way to the West Coast, all the way to Sacramento. No idea. According to a Google Maps search that I did, Sacramento is some 2,865 miles away from Whiteface Mountain. It's literally the opposite side of the country. Now, when Danny was dropped off in Sacramento, he somehow had a brand new iPhone with him, and he had also managed to get a haircut along the way, and all this, and yet still the only thing that he could remember was that he ended up hitching a ride with a truck driver who told him somewhere along the way that they were driving through Utah. And so as more of these strange details started to come out, the story understandably got more and more press coverage. And to be honest, a lot of the details still remain a mystery, even to Danny himself, apparently. However, investigators have been able to piece together an overall picture of what likely happened in this incredibly bizarre scenario. So it all started after Danny parted way with his friends on Whiteface Mountain that day. He apparently took a wrong turn while skiing back towards his car, and investigators believe that at some point going down the mountain, somewhere near a children's ski slope, ironically enough, he took a fall, which caused some sort of traumatic brain injury affecting his judgment and, well, completely wiping his memory. After this, he must have, gotten the rest of the way down the mountain and then flagged down a truck driver. And at that point, he began his trip across the country. The truck driver, or maybe even there was multiple drivers, we don't even know, but whoever these folks were that Danny hitched a ride with were never identified, unfortunately, and so we're probably never really gonna know what Danny told them, and especially about his intended destination. I'd be incredibly curious to hear about that, but they weren't able to find any of these people, unfortunately. But what Danny eventually found was that he was in California, just like that. And he was dropped off near Richards Boulevard, which is just off of Interstate 5. And then the next day after this, he made his way about 13 miles to the Sacramento airport, where he was finally picked up and brought to the hospital. Another strange thing about this is that investigators still have no idea how he got from Richards Boulevard to the airport. And just as a reminder, once again, he was still wearing his ski clothing and his ski gear when he showed up there. My understanding is that Danny Philippidis would go on to make a full recovery from this bizarre incident, which is, awesome. Of course, we don't want anybody to get hurt here. And many doctors, at least in the articles that I read, have suggested that he probably suffered from amnesia. This could have been either due to a concussion or something else. Again, I don't really know, but I'm just so glad that he was okay. But he doesn't remember much from it. And so we're likely never going to know exactly what the hell happened. I do remember, you know, at the time that all of this happened, and especially after they found him in Sacramento, there was lots of like wild theories about how he ended up there or why he went there. Maybe he was running from something, all this stuff. But in the years that have passed since then, I think it's become pretty clear that this literally all just stemmed from the head injury. There was no conspiracy. It was just a very rare and bizarre case. Now, the searchers that were looking for Danny around Whiteface Mountain were absolutely just giving their all to find them. And though he wasn't there, it's not like he was purposely trying to hide from them, right? I mean, that seems like something that wouldn't happen. If you're lost, of course you want to be found. But in our next story, as searchers tore through the backcountry to try and find a missing hiker, this hiker was actually evading them because, well, she thought that they were chasing her. So, let's flash back to November of 1989. There's a young woman who had just graduated from college, and on November 4th, she decides to take a backpacking trip on the Foothills Trail in South Carolina. I would go on to hike the Foothills Trail myself some 30 years after this story took place, and it was great, although I will say it was far less eventful than this woman's hike. I've actually decided to keep her name anonymous in this story, honestly, because it happened so long ago, and I also feel like she probably doesn't look back on this experience with very fond memories. So this 22-year-old woman was about 6 months out of college, and she decided that a solo backpacking trip would be a good way to like spend some time pondering, you know, where she was in her life and where she wanted to go next. At some point on her hike, she accidentally strayed from the trail and she found herself lost. And that's obviously an incredibly scary situation, of course. But for this woman, it was even scarier than it probably should have been, to be honest, because after she got lost, she became convinced that there were men in the woods who were trying to follow her and were trying to harm her. Again, this happened in 1989, so long ago, before the internet and stuff, obviously, and so there really isn't that much information about this story online. I could only find like 1 or 2 legitimate sources, and so I apologize about how general the rest of this story is going to sound, but I'm giving you what I know. And so with that said, authorities believe that this woman, after she got lost, she saw some hunters in the woods, and for whatever reason, she thought that these hunters were like coming after her. She even said that the men were carrying walkie-talkies and she could like hear them talking about her. I'm not exactly sure who reported her missing or even exactly when she was reported missing for that matter, but at some point, search and rescue was called in to try and locate this missing woman. Authorities searched this very rugged and remote terrain for a full week. Again, they went all out. They utilized more than 100 people in the process, but eventually they made no progress, and so eventually they had to call off the search. And that could have been the end of the story, to be honest with you, but thankfully it wasn't. About 2 weeks after she had started her trip, this missing woman was found alive by, ironically enough, a different hunter. She was found in Table Rock State Park, which is near the highest point in South Carolina, which is Sassafras Mountain. And so they found her, and they took her to the hospital, of course, and thankfully she was pretty much okay. She had a few like infections on her feet from blisters and stuff, I'm sure, but otherwise she was in pretty good health, you know, especially given what she had just gone through for the past 2 weeks. However, when the authorities, you know, started to interview her and tried to get an idea of what the hell had happened, they quickly started to piece together an incredibly frustrating story, for the lack of a better word. So not only did this woman believe that the hunters were after her, but she also believed that the people that were searching for her, search and rescue, the authorities, all these people, she also believed that they might have been after her as well. She knew, you know, after enough time had passed that rescuers were likely going to be looking for her, but this poor woman was just so terrified that she actually hid from these rescuers, fearing that they might also have been after her or that they were the men that were originally after her and trying to harm her. One official from this case said, quote, "From the very beginning, before the search was initiated, she became frightened or paranoid that someone was trying to run her down. We feel that had she wanted to come out and be rescued, the opportunity was probably there numerous times. The authorities also specified that there is no evidence that any hunters were stalking this poor woman. Another official said that he personally believed that the woman probably heard construction workers talking via walkie-talkie like speakers on their trucks, and that she had thought they were talking about her for some reason. And so all this is coming out, and the authorities are kind of piecing this together. And yet still after that, even after talking to the authorities and everything, the woman still insisted to the press that something wasn't right with her situation. She actually said, quote, "I could tell there was no good intent involved, and that she, quote, used instinct like a deer." Very strange story. And listen, please go easy on this woman in the comments here. I mean, she obviously made some bad choices, like we can acknowledge that, but at the end of the day, this was so long ago. I'm sure, you know, she was only 22. I'm sure she has probably gone on to regret a lot of her decision making in this story. And, you know, thankfully no one was harmed in the process either. And so I hope that she was able to make a recovery physically and from this like paranoid mindset. And, you know, I hope that she's doing well now. Seriously, I encourage you to leave some love for her in the comments as well. Now, the search for this woman was obviously very involved, and unfortunately, I couldn't find the name of the search and rescue agency responsible for looking for her. It's possible that it was just like volunteers working under the leadership of the government. I'm not sure what the search and rescue situation was like back then, but still, I love the mountains of northwestern South Carolina. I've spent a good amount of time up there. I even lived in Greenville, South Carolina for a couple months last year. And so with that said, my give back call out this week is going to be a volunteer group named Foothills Search and Rescue. Their mission is to, quote, assist law enforcement and emergency agencies in locating lost and missing persons with highly trained search and rescue canine teams to help locate lost and missing persons. Once again, this group is made up of unpaid volunteers. I'm not affiliated with them at all, but I have made a donation to them. I like to call out these groups in most of my videos, so I'd encourage you to make a donation as well, even if it's just a few bucks, doesn't have to be a lot. I'll have their website in the description if you can do that, please. So, that was a very bizarre story. I feel like I'm using that word a lot in this video, bizarre. And our next story, to be honest, is equally as bizarre, although it is much more evil as well. And if you don't believe me, I'm not just being dramatic for the video. Take a look at this photo right here. In April of 2012, a Forest Service worker was patrolling along the Big Springs Hollow Trail near Orem, Utah, when he noticed something incredibly disturbing. Somebody had built a structure, like a man-made structure out of fallen trees and branches, and inside the structure were 2 booby traps. Now, thankfully, this Forest Service worker, who was named Officer James Scheffler, I'm pretty sure I'm saying that last name right. This gentleman had been trained in hazardous device detection. It just so happened that he had those skills. I believe, this isn't in my script, but I want to say when I was writing this, I remember seeing that he had served in Iraq or something like that. I know he was in the military at some point. And so, yeah, he had training in not only, you know, being able to spot these kinds of devices, but also in how to disable them. And so that's what he did. When he found them, he took them apart. He made sure that they weren't a hazard to anybody anymore, which was incredibly lucky that he was the one that found them. Because if you just think about it, imagine if it was just like your average hiker, somebody like me, or even like a little kid or something. I mean, they wouldn't have known any better. They would have seen this interesting fort. They would have gone over, and then they would have easily fallen prey to these booby traps. This structure, this shelter, was built as a lure, essentially, like to kind of draw somebody in, and then once somebody stepped inside of it, they would have set off a tripwire. And when they did this, it would have caused a massive 20-pound spiked boulder to come swinging down and strike the unsuspected victim right in the head. And then there was another booby trap in there too. This one was designed to trip somebody and have them fall into a hidden bed of sharp wooden stakes that were sticking out of the ground, something straight out of like Vietnam. I mean, just an incredibly disturbing find that was clearly meant to kill or injure random hikers. Utah County Sheriff Sergeant Spencer Cannon said, quote, "It took some time to build these traps. They took rope, heavy-duty fishing line, and they intended what the traps were going to do. A lot of people go up there after dark as well, were very, very fortunate that it was Officer Scheffler who found it. These traps were located only about a half-mile down the trail, very close to the popular Big Springs Park trailhead is my understanding, so just a terrible location for this. Cannon also said, quote, "Who goes up this trail thinking, I'm gonna have to look out for booby traps?" A kid could say, "Oh cool, a shelter," and run right across the trip line. So naturally, the question is, who the hell would do this? Like, this is just evil. And also, why the hell would they do this? And we don't really have a clear answer to the second question there, but authorities thankfully were quickly able to find the answers to the first. So after this story broke, an anonymous person submitted a tip to the police based off of some photos they had seen on Facebook, of course. And these photos made it possible for the authorities to quickly discover that 2 young men from Orem and Provo were the ones responsible. 19-year-old Benjamin Rutkowski and 21-year-old Kay Matthew Christensen were arrested, and they soon argued that the traps were not intended to hurt people, but were rather for animals in the area. The authorities, however, were not buying this story. Cannon said, quote, "This is a shelter put together by people, visited by people. Anything that would be impacted by their device would have to be humans." Rutkowski's attorney argued that the young men were kind of just messing around, mimicking what they had seen on TV, Man vs. Wild, whatever. They were essentially just doing that. His attorney said, quote, "It was just a stupid decision. When he realized and thought about it, he went up there and tried to disable the devices, but by that time, the ranger had taken them down. I don't think they ever really intended anybody to get caught in the thing. It was more games, capture the flag, and military type of stuff. Just a couple of boys messing around." And who knows if that's true or not, but either way, it's a super sketchy situation. Now, both of these men were originally going to be charged with felonies, but these charges were later reduced to misdemeanor reckless endangerment, I guess because nobody was actually injured by the booby traps, thank God. In October of 2012, Benjamin Rutkowski was sentenced to 20 days in jail and a year of probation, which, I mean, he got lucky, dude. Very, very lucky that his sentence was so light, because if someone had been killed or injured by those traps, I feel like there's a pretty good chance that he would still be behind bars as I make this video. The other dude, Christensen, K. Christensen, well, he was sentenced to 30 days in jail and 18 months of probation. I really hope that during the years following 2012, these 2 young men got their freaking act together, dude. I hope that they learn their lesson, and I hope that they appreciate how lucky they are that they got away with these crimes relatively unscathed. Not even being charged with a felony. It could have been so much worse, and so I'm so glad that no one was hurt. And guys, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and help us reach our goal of 1 million subscribers. We got a long ways to go. And YouTube seems to think that you'd enjoy watching this video right here next. And so give it a watch, and I'll see you guys in the next one.